Good afternoon, and before we start, I'd like to apologize for the background noise. Okay, so here we go. Week 19 Viva. This week's Viva question is, what can we learn about the context of Jesus' life from contemporary historical accounts? In order to really understand the full meaning of the events in Jesus' life and ministry, we need to understand their historical context. The historical accounts of the lives of people who appear in Scripture's descriptions of Jesus' life provide us with information essential to understanding our faith. And the three figures or people we're going to look at today, we're going to look at the life of Herod the Great, the Magi, and Pontius Pilate. So first off, Herod the Great. History teaches us that Herod was a controversial figure in the Jewish world, whose violence was well known, providing better context to his reaction to the Magi and his killing of the infant boys in Bethlehem. Besides these things, the killing of the infant boys and his association with the Nativity story, Herod isn't really mentioned in the Bible at all. The only real other mention of a Herod that we get is that he died by worms in Acts. Now, just to make clear, the Herod that died by worms in Acts was not Herod the Great. It was his relative, but Herod the Great did die by worms, just not in that account. Anyway, Herod was a very unlikely king, and his route to the throne was quite unusual. Herod was an Edomite and not from a royal family. Herod's father, Antipater, was a moderate noble Herod's father was a moderate noble, and they rose to the governor of Judea and converted to Judaism and became involved in the politics. Herod Antipater rescued Julius Caesar in the Battle of Alexandria and was rewarded with the office of chief minister of Judah. He made his son governor of Galilee. After Julius Caesar's death, Herod sided against Antony. His pro-Roman politics made him unpopular with the devout non-Hellenistic Jews. When a Parthian army invaded Judah, Antony actually argued for Herod to become the king of the Jews. To quote Josephus, quote, Mark Antony then resolved to get Herod made king of the Jews, told the Senate that it was for their advantage in the Parthian War that Herod should be made king, unquote. Although now king, Herod's position remained shaky. In order to prevent his brother-in-law from taking the throne from him, his brother-in-law was the rightful king. So in order to prevent that from happening, Herod made his brother high priest, so he promoted him out of danger. But his brother-in-law had only been high priest for a year when Herod invited him over to a pool party, or whatever their equivalent for that was, and then had some hitmen drown him while he was swimming. When Antony was actually defeated by Octavian, Herod's close connection with him left him in quite an awkward position. He traveled to meet with Octavian and apologized, abdicating his throne. He was also famous for building the temple and for his extreme paranoia. So that's Herod the Great. And we also know from Herod's connection with the Magi what we can learn from them, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So moving on to the Magi. The visit of the Magi was far from the way it is portrayed in nativity scenes. Not just simply wise men or kings, the Magi were Parthian priests or astrologers from the Zoroastrian religion, and were considered an ominous group among the Roman world. We know the biblical account of the visit of the Magi, but who were the Magi, and why was their visit so important? Well, like I already said, the Magi were Zoroastrian priests and important figures in Persian history. The word also became associated with sorcery, giving rise to the words magic and magician from Magi. These priests were likely very familiar figures with Herod already. Their appearance would have terrified him, for good reason too. This was because that they had invaded Judah in 40 BC, installed a ruler of their own, and forced Herod to flee. And this was when he made his pitch to Antony to be made king of the Jews. So imagine you've been made king after being driven out of your land, and the people still don't like you, and then the people who invaded you 20 years ago or 40 years ago show up with gifts and say, hey, we hear there's a new king. Like, you freak out. And so Herod justifiably is a little worried by these people. The Magi were possibly pursuing a prophecy from Zoroaster. They believed that the rising of a star signified the birth of a messianic figure. To quote from their religious scriptures, the Avesta, quote, "He will be the victorious Saoshyant by name, and will renovate the world," unquote. They also believe that he would be born from a virgin, which is also very interesting considering that the messianic prophecies from the Bible also indicated the same thing. Interestingly enough, they were not only visiting Herod, they also paid a visit to Nero with the same assumption that he could be the promised Saoshyant, which is quite fascinating, actually. But the Romans didn't really like their visit. They thought they were trying to convert Nero to Zoroastrianism. Speaking of the Romans, the one Roman figure that we're going to be discussing today is Pontius Pilate. Pilate's weak position in Rome and his bad reputation with the population of Judea offers important insights into the trial of Jesus. Pilate is mentioned many times in the Bible, specifically in association with Jesus' trial. We've found coins minted by Pilate and also his signet ring, and a stone that names Pilate as having dedicated it. Pilate was a member of a family whose status basically equated them to knighthood in Rome, and his name could possibly mean he started out as a javelin thrower in the Roman army. But despite all of this, he was an outsider in Roman politics. The post of governor of Judea, which he held for 10 years, was a relatively low position. His duties were primarily military, but more focused on policing the city. He was also responsible for taxes, minting coins, and the judicial system. He was close with the Sadducees, which is very interesting, because especially since Pilate had gotten off to a pretty rough start with the Jewish population. He had begun by bringing in the Roman standards to Jerusalem, and this caused widespread rioting, and then Pilate ordered his soldiers to draw their weapons on the rioters, which promptly stood up and asked to be killed, and Pilate was so impressed with their bravery that he acquiesced and removed the standards. But the second stupid thing that he did was he placed Roman shields in Herod's palace. And after the population complained to Tiberius, who was emperor, Tiberius ordered that Pilate remove them because they were disrupting the peace of the population. And third, he used treasury money from the temple to build an aqueduct, which caused more rioting, which he then quelled with undercover people assaulting the rioters. All of the sources that we have agreed that Jesus was tried for sedition. According to Tacitus, quote, "Christ, the founder of the name, had undergone the death penalty in the in the region of Tiberias, by sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate," unquote. Josephus also correlates this account. Pilate spent a large part of his career cracking down on messianic movements, and this was actually what got him out of Judea. He had a group of Samaritan messianic people following their so-called Messiah slaughtered, and when the leading people in Rome heard about it, they had him removed, and he was recalled back to Rome and never returned to Judea. It's thought that he may have served in Switzerland, but most people just agree that he probably lived out a quiet life and died in peace. So, in conclusion, in order to gain a better understanding of our faith, we can look at the historical accounts of people mentioned in connection with Jesus' life, including Herod, the Magi, and Pontius Pilate.